So it has been a few days since we last spoke about the 8-passenger situation, and as you're probably aware by now if you've been keeping up with this situation, just within the last few days, there have been a lot of updates. We have more statements from family members, Kevin's attorney has came out again trying to make Kevin seem like some type of angel, Kevin's own family have spoke out, and then also Adam Steed, who, if you remember, we actually spoke about a long time ago. I think it was like my second ever video talking about Connexions when I was made aware of the fact that Jodi Hildebrandt actually had her counselling licence suspended. Now, we went into the details that we knew at the time, which was basically we knew that Jodi had been speaking about one of her clients and telling the church about his personal information and making lies about him, but we didn't know the extent of it. Well, now Adam has done an interview with Moment Stories podcast and he has spoke a lot more about it, giving a lot more details, and it's worse than you could imagine. Now, like with my other videos on 8-passengers, I want to try and do this in chronological order from when this information was released. So I want to start with this interview with Kevin's attorney.
He was completely taken off guard by these allegations, completely shocked.
Absolutely shocked.
Yeah, so this is something that Kevin's attorney keeps saying, is that Kevin had no idea what was going on and all this stuff, but it is hard to believe. Like, yeah, maybe Kevin didn't know the extent of what was happening recently within the last, like, year or so. That being because Kevin and Ruby had split, and from what we know now, it seems like Ruby wanted nothing to do with Kevin and didn't give him any information of what was going on. But again, there was years where Kevin and Ruby were together. They were in the same house, they were raising the kids together, and they did some disgusting stuff that we've covered in many, many videos now. So yeah, maybe Kevin didn't know the details of the last year, which by the sounds of it, from the details we know, has been a lot worse than previous years. But then previous years were still bad, and he was a part of it.
And how did he find out? He found out on the news? Did someone call him?
He got a call from Ruby.
He got a call from Ruby Franke.
Correct.
You mean while she was, after she was arrested?
Before.
Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. She had heard what was going on and knew they were coming for her and called him and said, this is an emergency, even though she hadn't reached out to him for months and months and months before that.
So yeah, that's interesting that Ruby knew this was going to happen. I'm not exactly sure how she knew this was happening. This could just simply be because Ruby was away when the police showed up, which is what, like, all the articles say. So maybe when the police showed up and obviously it was Jodi who was at home, Jodi's maybe rang Ruby and told her, like, this is happening, and then she's decided to ring Kevin. Or it could be something completely unrelated, but we're a bit in the dark here.
And when she told him that she was in Ivan's, he responded and said, what are you doing in Ivan's? And she then told him that the kids were down there, some of the kids were down there, and he needed to come down.
Yeah, again, I find it very hard to believe that Kevin wasn't aware that the kids were at Jodi's house. Or at least I find it hard to believe that he would be shocked that they're at Jodi's house, because it's not like Ruby and Kevin split and then Jodi and Ruby became friends. Kevin is a part of a bunch of the old Connexions videos where Jodi is also a part of them. Like, he has met Jodi before. He's also clearly aware that Jodi and Ruby are always together because the whole world was aware of that. And also, we have been aware of the fact that Ruby's been spending a lot of time at Jodi's house. I mean, they filmed the Connexions videos there by the looks of it. But also, these were details that we covered months ago, that it seems like a bunch of the kids now live at Jodi's with Ruby, or at least they're there for a long period of time. So if we were aware of it, I find it hard to believe that Kevin wasn't aware of it, but I mean, maybe he wasn't.
They were separated, I read, for 13 months, so they weren't living with each other. How much was he seeing the kids?
Almost not at all. Actually, not at all.
Why is that? Why is that?
Because she told him it was better, that they needed to work on their marriage and needed to keep their family together, but that everything was better off with him not in the home and not communicating with the children.
So yeah, that seems a bit weird to me that Kevin wasn't able to see any of the kids and didn't try to see any of the kids. He just kind of took Ruby's word for it, I guess. And honestly, the potential reasons for this are a bit conflicting, because we've heard the stories of people who've had experience with Jodi in the past, like Adam, for example, who we'll speak about later. And it makes it very clear that Jodi intentionally tries to ruin marriages, and she tries turning the woman on their husband. So this definitely seems like something that Jodi would coach Ruby to do, to try and get Kevin out of the situation, right? But then Ruby's sister has also released a video talking about this situation that we will again speak about later, where she says over and over again that Kevin could have done more. Kevin didn't do enough. So yeah, I would love to know your thoughts on that. I don't think Kevin is the angel that his attorney is trying to make him seem throughout all of these interviews. Obviously that is his job, but I don't believe it for a second.
Why were they separated? What was the catalyst?
I probably shouldn't go into that. That's pretty private.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just say they had a difference of opinion about their family.
Parenting? I know you can't talk about it, but is it that kind of where we're going?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, who are we to say that isn't true? Maybe he did see the extreme lengths that Ruby and Jodi were going with their advice and their methods on parenting. But again, obviously, throughout the last few years, we have seen that Kevin was okay with this extreme version of parenting, and yeah, it could have got a lot more extreme. In fact, it really does seem like it has got a lot more extreme over the last couple of years. But who knows? It might have got too extreme even for Kevin, who clearly had extreme beliefs before. Like I said, he was a part of Connexions at the beginning.
He was taking direction from her. She's the one who asked him to leave the house and indicating that in order for him to be able to get back together with her and be a family, that she was requesting that he leave the home and that he not contact them or the children. Later told him that everything was blissful at home. It was so much better without him.
Yeah, I mean, when we hear Adam's story later on, this does make a lot of sense. This is something that Jodi did over and over again. She would take a married couple and coach the woman to basically hate their husband, kick them out and stuff like this. And it sounds very similar to Adam's story, especially with the part with being kicked out the house and whatnot.
Did he ever believe that the kids were in danger? Did he ever believe that Ruby might have been doing something to the kids?
He had nothing to indicate that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a load of shite. I don't even need to explain why that seems ridiculous. I think everyone had an indication that something bad is going on. I mean, how many people have spoke about it now?
Ruby Franke told Kevin that, it's better off he's not part of the home, and, that he lived separately from them and not to have any contact. He just took that as, okay, that sounds like a good idea. Or did she prevent him in any way from seeing the kids? Did he want to see them and talk to them and she told him no?
Emotionally, she was controlling him because she knew how much he valued their marriage and valued their family. And it was his desire to be able to get back with the family and preserve his marriage. So he was taking direction from her, and her direction was, it's so much better off, and I think we can salvage our marriage if you just, for now, don't have communication with the kids, and I will communicate with you. I'll reach out to you when we need to have communication.
Yeah, I mean, this again does sound very similar to what we're going to hear later on in the video. But it all does seem to start from Jodi's coaching and how she manipulates people and basically brainwashes people into ruining their marriage, ruining their families' lives, and doing some of the most disgusting stuff.
Even putting aside the arrest of Ruby Franke, your client was receiving criticism for quite some time over the parenting techniques. What has his response been to that?
There hasn't ever been an allegation that Kevin Franke has ever physically abused his children.
I mean, that is very specific wording, and that technically might be true, but, let's take a look at the other allegations that have been made against him. The other stuff he was okay with when he lived at the home. With not feeding their kids, even though their teachers are literally reaching out to them saying, look, your kids don't have food, they're gonna go hungry, and they were okay with that. Also, the whole situation with Chad, where he had his bed taken away from him for 7 months because he played a prank on his brother. The whole not giving certain kids Christmas presents, but they have to watch their other siblings open Christmas presents because they behaved a bit badly. The list goes on and on. This is all stuff that he was okay with at the time.
So for the lot of people who are looking at your client, making assumptions about what he may or may not have done, what is the message that you want out there?
Just what I keep repeating, that if you get to know Kevin, he is an incredibly decent guy. He's been a great father. He's provided for this entire family, even during his absence. He's made sure that they had financial means to provide for whatever they needed. He's never been a violent person. He's never severely disciplined his children, and especially not in a physical way.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you need to keep saying that it's not in a physical way, because saying that he hasn't severely disciplined his children is just a straight up lie. We've seen it in videos. And also taking away a bed for 7 months and not giving your kids food when they haven't packed any food for school when they're 6 years old. That is physical. It's physical discipline. Yeah, he might not have put his hands on them, but that is still physical discipline. And again, you could maybe use the excuse that was all Ruby's idea, but he was at the house at this point. They were literally together, he was in all the videos, he knew all of this was going on. I think one thing that we've learned from all this information that has came out is that It doesn't seem like Kevin was as bad as Ruby, because Ruby has got a lot more extreme since splitting with Kevin. That's at least what it seems like from the information we have been told, but it was still bad before that, and Kevin isn't the angel that his attorney keeps trying to make him seem. In fact, Kevin's side of the family has actually spoke out about all of this, talking about Jodi and Ruby, goes into more details about how they never really had a good opinion of Ruby in the first place. Two of Kevin's sisters-in-law have actually spoke out and they've said stuff like, I don't think she should get out on bail. I do believe the allegations against her. After all of this, she should be put away forever if convicted. Ruby isn't really my cup of tea. I never really liked her from day one. She always thought she was better than anyone she's around. If you look up narcissist in the dictionary, there will be a picture of Ruby. She shares examples of experiences that she's had with Ruby in the past, like this one here saying, after having dinner, my kids grabbed some snacks to eat. They offered some to their cousins, Ruby's kids. She wouldn't allow them to eat any of the snacks. Then Ruby had the gall to say to me, I just can't believe you allow your kids to run amok in your kitchen. I told her it's my house and my kids. One thing that is worth mentioning, it does say in this article that they haven't actually seen Ruby or Kevin in about a decade. And they also said, when they started doing their YouTube channel, no one on the Franke side of the family wanted to be part of it. We thought, how can you be taking care of your kids and filming them? They also responded to Ruby's recent claims that we spoke about in my last video, and it was a bit, like, up in the air if Ruby actually did say it, because it was just the one article. From the information that we've gathered now, it seems like the reason there was only one article is because a reporter for the Daily Mail apparently snuck into the juvenile court hearing and heard them allegations and published them. Again, I wouldn't take as 100% fact, but when Kevin's attorney was asked about it, he didn't deny that these statements were actually said. He just said that the reporter who reported on it snuck in and published it, which is wrong. But either way, Jennifer, who was Kevin's brother's wife, says, I don't think there's any excuse for what she did to those two children. I don't believe her kids were the abusers she claims. I don't believe a word out of her mouth. I don't think her children molested anyone. Look how strict she is with her kids apart from the last year. I don't see how her kids could have molested their cousins as she claims. It just doesn't make sense what she is saying. And as we go further down this article, we get even more details that says, it was a cult. Kevin was in a men's group at Connexions. He had a checklist of what he needed to do to be better, and if you did, they would praise you, and if you didn't, they would chastise you. When Jodi moved into the family's Springville Marshall home, one of the first things she did was separate Ruby and Kevin. It was almost like the movie War of the Roses. Ruby was living on one side of the house and Kevin was living on the other. Kevin couldn't talk to Ruby unless Jodi was present. Again, sounds absolutely mental, but with the details we know about Jodi, this seems like it could be very possible. And let's actually get to some of the new details we have heard about Jodi. And this is from an interview with Steed on the Mormon Stories podcast. It's a just under 6-hour interview going into a lot of details of his experience. This is obviously someone we spoke about a long time ago, but we didn't know all the details. Now, obviously, I can't summarize all the details here because it is a 6-hour interview pretty much. There's a lot of details that I won't be able to say just for time. But I really recommend watching this interview on the Mormon Stories podcast because you really get a good idea of what Jodi is like as a human, and she's fucking despicable. I will give you a pre-warning, it is a very, very heavy interview, and it's really tough to actually get through, so I do just want to give you that as a bit of a pre-warning if that maybe is something that you don't feel like you could sit through. But I will summarize some of the key points now, because when I watched this interview, I was writing a bunch of notes, and this is the stuff I've written down. So the interview starts off talking about Adam's childhood. He had a lot of trauma from his childhood. He was essayed multiple times. Now, obviously, with Adam going through this when he was a child, it can affect your life in many, many different ways. It's trauma at the end of the day, right? And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because Jodi would use this against him throughout her counselling, which obviously I don't need to mention is fucking disgusting. Everybody knows that. But yeah, Adam and his ex-wife actually ended up going to Jodi for marriage counselling, and Jodi would say things straight away like, for a marriage to be reborn, it has to die first. And she meant this quite literally, it seems like, because she genuinely tried her absolute best to ruin this marriage, and she succeeded. Like I've mentioned before, she would manipulate women to think down on their husband and say some of the most disgusting allegations with absolutely no proof. In fact, the person doing this interview mentions the fact that he knows someone whose wife or ex-wife went to Jodi and had a very similar experience. She's done this over and over again. So Jodi gave advice to Adam's ex-wife that she had to set these boundaries, and by the way, this is all happening when Adam's ex-wife is pregnant, and she gave these boundaries with like a very formal letter, basically saying that there couldn't be any physical touch. They basically weren't even allowed to speak. They weren't allowed to talk about like where she was going or anything like that. She didn't want to help out around the house with like cleaning dishes and so on. And she basically said that she wanted to just act like friends, right? And this actually resulted in Adam having to sleep on the floor in his own apartment that he paid for. Now, when this woman actually created this list of boundaries, she sent it to Jodi to look over, and Jodi wanted to be more specific. And one specific thing she added to the list was that Adam wasn't allowed to stop his ex-wife funding Jodi and like her counselling, and also Adam wasn't allowed to go to any other therapist. He had to go to Jodi, which again just shows how controlling Jodi was, and if he was to go to any other therapist, she would try and ruin his life, and that's exactly what happened later on. Now, through the methods that Jodi advised this woman to use, this woman actually ended up ringing the police on multiple occasions. In fact, Adam mentions one occasion where she rang the police, said that she was being abused and that Adam was going against her boundaries, and when asked what these boundaries were, it was because Adam left his backpack on the couch. Adam then says that she rang the police the very next day saying that he'd been like physical to her, and when asked to explain this, it was because she was blocking a doorway so he couldn't actually leave the apartment, and she even admits that she never got hurt or anything like that. She was just blocking the doorway. And there's a bunch more instances that Adam goes into details with, but eventually he got sick of this and decided he's not going to sleep on the floor in his own apartment that he pays for. He's going to sleep in his bed, and he says to his ex-wife that if you don't want to sleep in the bed, that's fine, but this is my apartment, I'm sleeping in the bed, you do what you want to do. Now, his ex-wife ended up using this against him in court and mentions this occasion and said that she thought he could, like, R-word her, not that he ever tried to, she just thought that it could have been a possibility. And then at this point, Jodi tells Adam's ex-wife to file a restraining order. And the way she ends up coaching this woman and the methods she tells this woman to use is straight up disgusting. She basically told her to file this restraining order and then try and like bait Adam into breaking it. One example of this was when Adam's bishop actually got in contact with Adam and mentioned that he had been talking to like Adam's ex-wife. The bishop tells Adam that his ex-wife is still very much in love with him and that he can sort it out, and that she needed this $800 stroller and her journals back. Adam says that these journals were very incriminating as well. Now at this point, Adam asks the bishop if this is definitely okay, because obviously there's this restraining order and whatnot, and he's like, yeah, it's fine, I spoke to her, she seems very happy with it all. So at this point, he's got some hope that this relationship could be resolved, and he ends up going to the police station to give this stuff over. And he says that his ex-wife seemed very happy at first, and then suddenly starts like accusing him of being homosexual, and then straight after this statement just decides to leave in the car. She actually has the door open where her child is sat, so Adam closes the door, you know, for the child's safety, and she then ends up using this instance as a way to prove that Adam like went against his restraining order. She was basically trying to bait him the whole time. In fact, in this interview, Adam actually shows one of the emails from Jodi to his ex-wife where she is coaching her through this and making sure that she does every step correctly so Adam gets in the biggest amount of trouble. And through this coaching with Adam's ex-wife, they end up actually getting Adam arrested. And at this point, he's facing 4 charges that could lead up to a total of 20 years in prison. And Adam also mentions that his ex-wife ends up contacting Jodi, like replying to these like methods, and said something along the lines of, oh, the suckers really fell for it. Just blatantly trying to ruin his life under false allegations. I haven't even got into all the details of the false allegations. They're genuinely sickening. They would just make up stories, like I said, kind of bait him into situations and like spin it to make it seem like it's something it's not. Jodi herself even accused Adam of stalking up to 90 times, even though she never filed a single police report. She just mentioned this while the trial was going on. Adam also then mentions the fact that Ruby's been accusing her kids recently of disgusting stuff, and he says he doesn't believe it for a second, because he knows how Jodi would accuse people of stuff that just wasn't true, and this was kind of always her defense. So he says it's not really a surprise that Ruby would try this tactic too, and he doesn't believe a word of it. Now eventually his felony charges all got dropped, and in fact the only thing he actually had to do was pay a couple $100 for attempting to break a protective order, which from the information that we've gathered here, it still seems very wrong, but you can imagine how relieved he was that it was just a couple $100 he had to pay, and it wasn't what it could have been with the consequences. And after this, Adam ended up taking action which got Jodi's license suspended. And he was actually told that Jodi could be guilty of a bunch of criminal charges, but she had extremely powerful attorneys from the University of Utah, and they were funded by the Mormon church and whatnot. Like, she had a lot of power, so she could get away with a lot of this stuff. So even though she got her license suspended, it was nowhere near the punishment that it should have been. But again, like I said, I haven't even scratched the surface with the amount of details that Adam shares in this interview. It is genuinely disgusting, the stuff that Jodi would do, the way she would coach people into trying to just ruin people's marriages. And remember, she has been doing this for years. This situation in particular is from like 2009, 2010, over a decade ago, and she's still doing it to this day. It's a really, really sad interview to watch. In fact, I actually had to have breaks like while I was watching it, because it's ridiculously heavy, and saying that you feel sorry for Adam is a big understatement. Like, it's absolutely disgusting what Jodi put him through and what she was making his loved ones do, like his ex-wife. Like, it's genuinely grim. So yet again, I do want to say, if you do want to see the full interview, it's on the Mormon Stories podcast. It is about 6 hours long and it is very heavy, but if you do want to hear more of the details, that's the place to go and see it. Now, the final thing I want to talk about in today's video is a video from Bonnie, Ruby's sister. It actually just came out 3 hours ago as I'm recording this video, and it's called I Am Not My Sister, I Am Not My Sister's Crimes. Now, obviously, Bonnie kind of released a bit of a mini statement not too long ago that we spoke about, and in fact, after I uploaded my video kind of reacting to that, the video ended up getting deleted. I believe the reason why it may have been deleted is because in the video, Bonnie mentions that she's been aware of this for 3 years, and she's been trying her best to help the situation, and a bunch of people kind of like spun that into saying, oh, so you knew about this for 3 years and you still didn't do anything? And she actually mentions this criticism in this new video. So the video starts off with Bonnie saying that she is absolutely disgusted with what has happened.
I am mad at what has happened. I am beyond disgusted, and I feel like it makes me tremble. It makes me tremble because it is unheard of.
She then goes on to clarify her statements about knowing that this was going on for 3 years.
We have kept quiet for 3 years on the topic of our sister Ruby and Jodi and Kevin and Connexions. That is what we have stayed quiet about. We did not know what they were doing because, like we said, we were cut off. We did not have access to anyone.
Yeah, and I personally believe this. It's been very clear throughout the years that the rest of the family had no contact with Ruby, and I think it's good that she clarified this statement because people seem to believe that she actually knew about the specific details for years and did nothing about it. Where in my eyes, what she's saying right here seems like it could be very possible, but yet again, I obviously don't know. I wasn't involved. She then goes on to give her opinions on Connexions.
It was complete indoctrination of this thing that they created. I don't agree with how extreme they are on everything. I knew they were weird. I knew that they were off. Those are the things that we kept quiet about because what was I gonna say? What was I going to do? I was not going to come out and publicly say that I don't like my sister and I don't like what she's doing and I think she's weird.
And yeah, I feel like this was a lot of people's opinions. Like, I've made so many videos talking about Connexions before we knew all these new details. And even though I was absolutely disgusted by the stuff said in them videos, which you can tell in my previous videos, I never thought it could be as bad as this, because this is genuinely despicable, like, beyond anything I could have ever imagined. We knew it was really bad, but the extent of it was incredibly shocking. Like, I didn't even think even Ruby could be that bad. She then goes on to mention that she only was made aware of the actual details when she got back in contact with Sherry.
It wasn't until about a year ago when we were able to reconnect with Sherry. Again, we kept that quiet. We never came out and said anything. You guys saw us together and those were little glimpses when Sherry was ready to allow us to show those glimpses with her permission. And it was then that we were learning slowly bits and pieces of more. And that's where the part of behind the scenes, we did everything that we could. We did everything legally that we could do.
And now at this point, she actually goes on to talk about Kevin and says that Kevin could have done a lot more throughout this.
The one person that could have done something within his legal right was Kevin. We had zero contact with him. It was Kevin's job to check in on things, and he did not. So when I say that Ruby and Kevin and Jodi and Connexions have been destroying our lives offline for the last 3 years, that is exactly what they've been doing.
Which, yeah, is obviously very different to what Kevin's attorney has been saying. Yet again, it is Kevin's attorney's job to say this type of stuff. Because the way that he made it seem was as if Kevin was doing the right thing by not making contact with the kids because Ruby told him to. But he really should have. He should be trying to check in on his kids, especially knowing how extreme the opinions are of Ruby and Jodi and Connexions. That should truly be worrying enough to want to check in on your kids. And he even mentioned that the reason they split up in the first place was because of difference of opinion with parenting, right? So if you had this difference of opinion and you're worried about Ruby's parenting, Surely that should be enough to check up on them, right? That's why I'm a bit confused. Now, Bonnie actually goes on to mention how this has affected her mum throughout all of this.
She literally had a heart attack. She went into kidney failure. Her body was shutting down because it broke her. So you can only imagine what she is going through now, how we are all feeling now.
Yeah, it's absolutely mind-blowing that Ruby is aware of how this is affecting everyone, and for some reason she is still so delusional in the fact that she doesn't think she's done anything wrong. Like, surely if you were in a situation where everybody around you thinks you're wrong, right? Surely you would think, oh, maybe I could be? But no, it seems like Ruby didn't have that thought for even a second. She has still just been going on and getting worse and worse and worse, while everyone, even in her own family, is telling her what she is doing is disgusting. And even now, after being arrested, it still seems like she doesn't think she's done anything wrong. She's blaming other people. It's honestly mind-blowing. I genuinely don't think I've heard of someone more delusional in my life. But yeah, approaching the end of this video, Bonnie goes on to mention Kevin again.
There's only one person that could have helped, and he didn't. What he was doing all that time when him and Ruby were separated is beyond me. I will not let Ruby and Kevin and Connexions and Jodi take one more thing away from me.
So yeah, she mentions Kevin multiple times in this video, which gives a completely different perspective as to what his attorney has been saying throughout this. But this is all the information that we have at this point. I would love to know your opinions on everything that we spoke about in today's video, and I'm sure we'll get more updates in the near future. I am going to be going away for a week, so there won't be a video for over a week and a couple of days. So if you're wondering why I haven't posted a video on like new updates if they do happen, then that's why. I just thought I'd mention that. But yeah, like I said, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, and yeah, I'm gonna leave the video there. So if you're new, subscribe, all that stuff, and I'll see you guys in a bit. Alright, goodbye.